Welcome. This is a mini lecture on ancient Israel for Gender 2000. Ancient Israel is one of the cultures that we are studying for what it offers to our understanding of gender and how men and women were treated in the ancient world. Ancient Israel is important because of some of the sacred texts that they leave that become the foundation of the Judeo-Christian Bible that many people in the United States are more familiar with. In terms of the Bible, if you come from a Christian perspective, you'll know there's an Old Testament and a New Testament. The Old Testament is the material from the ancient Israeli culture. This has been called the most influential book of the last 3 millennia and used to be the best-selling book in the world until a few years ago it was replaced by Harry Potter in multiple translations. The Bible is still the most translated book that has been published. I start this first um, slide with some pictures of ancient Israel, the areas around it that they considered part of their territory or neighboring territories. And I point out on the first one all the way to the left that one of these areas is Gilead or Gilead. Um, and that is an area that was sometimes disputed, but that Israelis claimed as um, part of their territory from time to time. And it will become important to us in the second half of the semester when we look at The Handmaid's Tale. So the ancient Middle East and Israel today are located in between Egypt and Syria. Ancient Assyria, which you will have read about or will read about in the readings, and Egypt are kind of interrupted by Israel. Israel would certainly have known of the existence of both of these places and would have been trading with them. And the more learned people likely would have known the languages. So in the ancient world, unlike for Americans today, it was very important to be fluent in several languages so that you could trade, so that you could learn, so that you could take advantage of new knowledge as it was recorded. By the 13th century, before the Common Era, the Israeli people inhabited the hill country on both sides of the Jordan River, either as settlers or nomads. They were not a peaceful people. They were certainly willing to use martial force to expand their territory and hold and defend their territory. The climate there, much like today, was very sandy, warm, lacking rainfall. And so when you had pieces of land that you could irrigate or carry water to and grow things, you wanted to really hold those. For farming livestock, a lot of their sheep or goat herding would be done across large swaths of territory so that the animals did not overgraze any bit of it and that there were always shoots left that could be regrown. So it could be kind of sustaining in that way. In spite of that, you should note that they will mention in their texts, and historians have certainly confirmed that there are a lot of clans or tribes in that area that compete for the same areas, particularly around the rivers, um, which Israel will claim as their own. It should be noted that other groups claim that area as their own, and they're kind of constantly trying to test the borders and take territory. Even periods where the Israelis hold the territory somewhat uncontested are not exactly peaceful because within the ruling families, there will be contests for power, brothers trying to depose each other, etc. The society was governed on the basis of religious law in the ancient world in Israel, as in many other places. There's no separation of church and state. There are no conceptions of disciplinary divisions at all. So they wouldn't study math aside from science, aside from language. Um, and the traditional belief is that the religious law that they study has been given to them by Moses from God. Um, Again, this is sort of the ideological belief. Whether people believe that literally is not probably clear, at least for all people. It is not probably true for all people. We know that ancient Israel had a patriarchal culture. They practiced patrilineal descent. In other words, knowing who you were was based on knowing who your father was, and a patrilocal residence. So when women married, they were expected to go live with their husband and his family. In some places in ancient Israel, there were villages that were very settled and merchants that were crafters that worked from that village. And again, a lot of the farming is more nomadic and a lot of the trading is more nomadic. So you have groups of people who are not rooted to one place, but are rooted to the larger territory and will travel it. As previously described, that was necessary specifically for agriculture, but it could be certainly the competition of having a more settled place. Only when Hebrew women marry and become mothers of children do they gain authority over other people. Um, this patriarchal culture is reinforced and institutionalized by its laws. Most of those laws, again, are contained in their sacred documents, which we would know if we're Christian as the Old Testament. What that set of texts tells us about women is that a good Hebrew wife was industrious, wise, prudent, and gracious. She was supposed to teach her children and plant and maintain a vineyard, enhance her husband's reputation through her virtue, and they regarded her as a natural and God-ordained helpmate to her husband, a case that was reaffirmed both in law and in the mythos of the cultural ideology. So some of the religious documents that are not necessarily law will hold that as well. Um, the idea of a woman enhancing her husband's reputation through her virtue is one that is pretty commonplace in the Middle East, not only in ancient Israel, but in ancient Sumer, ancient Assyria, etc., and goes into the modern world where you will sometimes see people in current Syria or Jordan or Afghanistan who might be punished for harming their husband's reputation. Particularly in the last few years, we have seen a lot of incidents of young women who might try to date a man that their father or brothers don't approve of, who end up actually being executed by their father or brothers because they have disobeyed them and embarrassed the family by being seen with an unapproved male. We see that some of the text in ancient Israel's ideology are going to be just as harsh as ancient Sumer or Assyria, depending upon where we look in the text. So in Exodus and Deuteronomy, we are told that sex for women in ancient Israel belongs to the marriage bed, and even a girl who is raped has to become or gets treated as the wife of her attacker. A bride found not to be a virgin could be stoned to death by elders of the town. A woman committing adultery could expect death as a punishment. This is a double standard in the culture because men who, in a modern sense, cheat on their wives were not seen as cheaters if they had sex with prostitutes, or they could marry more than one woman. Now, ancient Israel did not really approve of polygamy the way it was legal in some other cultures like ancient Assyria. They were kind of embarrassed by it, but they recognized apparently that men have needs and could sleep with their wives or their servants or prostitutes. Women could not. Women who were prostitutes had no security generally, um, and really had to just do that because there were no men to take care of them. They did not have respect and they did not have security in the same way that a woman married to an Israeli male could claim sort of that citizen status, which gave her some respect. In ancient Israel, a woman could not divorce her husband. A husband could set his wife aside, although he would need to have a substantial cause for something larger than that. And if he sets his wife aside, he does have to pay for her upkeep as well. That men dominated religiously meant that they dominated socially and politically, again, because there's no separation of church and state in ancient Israel. And in your readings, Barbara Lesko will explain that this was probably not a conscious effort by men to attain and retain superiority over women, but that, quote, male strength, vigilance, and domination doubtlessly appeared necessary for the security of Israel's state throughout a tumultuous and war-torn history, and women as a group consequently became the state's least effective members. She'll conclude her discussion of ancient Israel by pointing out that Israel is sort of on the forefront of equal rights in terms of all the men, in terms of the philosophy and practices of the religious teachings, because they would teach the religion to anyone. They believed anyone could become a rabbi, a learned leader of the community, and politician within the state. And Lesko says the main object of the state was to secure justice and to respect the worth of the human spirit, yet the spirit of its women was strictly kept in check. The prophets did not challenge the inferior status of any women any more than they railed against the institution of slavery. So they saw an equal status in society for men, an equal opportunity for men within that Israeli culture. That doesn't necessarily apply to male slaves that they might take or male servants from other cultures, but of people born within that culture. The men enjoyed freedom with each other, even though there were separate classes and a freedom of opportunity. And women really did not have that. They were pushed into sex work if they had no one else to take care of them. Otherwise, they were, definitely subordinate to men, again, only having power over other people if they had small children. And that power ends pretty quickly because the boys are mentored into the family profession or they're given as apprentices to people in other professions. And the girls are married off to men and leave the household where they had lived with their mother. And so you see in ancient Israel that patriarchy um, was pretty pronounced. There are a few women within the biblical tradition who will challenge gender norms and become um, somewhat celebrities for it. But that's usually only in very dire moments when the state itself needs them to step into those roles. Then it honors them. It treats them as exceptions to the rule, rather than something seeing that role, that sort of non-traditional role, as something that any woman can do. Just that God has given a few of those women the ability to go above and beyond when they were called to do so. So ancient Israel still, um, you know, a very great patriarchy, um, and certainly one too that as we know, the culture shifts and evolves as it grows, um, and it's somewhat short-lived intact as they will be conquered by the Greeks and then the Romans, who will take these texts and then make more ideologies from them. And the next lecture, I'll talk about the Bible itself and some of the context surrounding the Bible before we get into looking at passages directly.